Right, today's episode, I'm talking to Derek Nash. Hi, how are you?
Yeah, very good, considering.
Yes.
I feel good. I feel sort of excited about the prospect of getting back out and playing, and just kind of re-establishing all the things that I used to do regularly. So yeah, I'm feeling positive about it all. There's lots of stuff in the book. I'm a little bit frightened, a little bit nervous, a little bit unsure of my relaxed status as a musician because I feel I'm not match fit, which is entirely my own fault. But vice versa, I've been sort of creative, like lots of people have been in this. Being creative in different directions. So, as always, in a bizarre way, the time has flown.
Yeah, wicked. Now, my traditional first question is, what do you do?
Well, I own saxophones.
Yes, we've always spoken about this.
I'm a saxophone owner. I've had a very interesting life career caused by choices which weren't necessarily even mine.
Mm-hmm.
But the way my career has panned out, it's ended up being quite multifaceted. And as a result of being multifaceted, has actually been rewarding, interesting, and great fun. So to explain my multifaceted career, to go back to actual stage one, I started piano at the age of 6. I started playing saxophone about 12, 13, pestered the life out of my parents to play a saxophone, got a saxophone, got fed up with boring classical lessons on piano, so concentrated on saxophone. I am very much the school of life on saxophone. I had very few lessons. I had a teacher at school who was a clarinet player who taught me a few basics things, but I bad thing of not learning clarinet first, so I found clarinet a difficult step up from saxophone because of the, without wishing to get too technical, the fact that one's a tube and one's a cone. One overblows the 12th, the other overblows the octave, so hence clarinet has different fingerings to a saxophone. So if you learn saxophone first, moving to a clarinet is quite hard. So I made more career decisions later down the line to play a range of saxophones to the best of my abilities rather than to play clarinet and flute. I do own a flute. I really do classify myself as a flute owner. It doesn't come out very often, but if I need to, I can get around a flute fairly badly. But I've made a feature of playing soprano, alto, tenor, and baritone saxophone all very regularly. If I play a quartet gig, I will take all 4 with me. I think that keeps the audience entertained.
Yeah.
It keeps me match fit on all 4 saxophones, because if you waited to be asked to play soprano and baritone, that would be twice a year.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't happen. But what happened at that stage, so I got an O level in music, got myself a saxophone, got myself into a local schools band called Stockport School Stage Sound, was having a great time. And then I said, well, obviously I want to do maths, physics and music, which seems the perfect combination because music is actually just maths. Is all frequencies, and understanding music is like understanding maths, and physics, well, that's the other side of music. That's how it actually, the sound waves appear. And for some very bizarre reason, my school at the time said, oh, you can't do those selections.
Yeah.
So I had to
this one before, go on.
I had to drop one of them.
Yeah.
You may think, well, why on earth did you drop music? Well, it was a very, very difficult time for my father, who was a professional musician and worked for one of the BBC's dance orchestras up in Manchester called the Northern Dance Orchestra, then the Northern Radio Orchestra. And at the time, the BBC decided, that's it, the band is going to be split up. So the NDO just stopped. So my father, who was a freelance arranger and composer for the NDO for 35 years, suddenly found he had no work whatsoever, having been continuously employed for the 30-odd years before then. That being the case, he went through quite a sort of terrible patch in his career, which was totally unexpected. And that was just at the point where I was saying, hey, Dad, I want to be a professional musician. So my parents got very frightened and said, play as much as you like, we'll support you, play anything you want anywhere, but have another string to your bow, please. Now, my mum was a practical one. She worked in a building society. So in the end, I did maths, physics and business studies and didn't do the music. They said, well, you don't need to do a music O level. You're already playing. So that was basically my whole life was decided at that point. When A levels were decided upon, that I wouldn't go for a formal musical education, because normally, left to my own devices, I would have done music A level, I would have gone to music college, and then at the age of 21, 22, I would have come out as a fully formed professional musician. The exact opposite happened. I ended up applying to the BBC to be a sound engineer, having got physics, maths and business studies A levels.
Right.
Thinking, well, if I can't be a professional musician and I haven't got the qualifications to go to music college because I haven't got an A level in music, let's go and be a sound engineer. I then failed at that interview. So this is, if I was going to give an inspirational talk to people, is never give up on your dreams. So I failed to get to the BBC interview. They didn't want me when I left school at A levels. And I just thought, what on earth am I going to do? And again, another strange choice was the fact that I was at school with a boy and his father was the professor of acoustics at Salford University. Now, having maths, physics and business studies meant I could actually apply to do acoustics. So I thought, well, acoustic, that must be how to learn to be a sound engineer, I thought. So I went and did a university degree in acoustics because David Lord I was at school with, his dad was Professor Peter Lord, who actually, out of interest, designed the mushrooms for the Albert Hall. If you go in the Albert Hall and look at the roof, there's all these mushrooms hanging down to bounce the sound around. He designed those. So I actually ended up sticking out 3 years at Salford University doing an acoustics degree, which I got, realizing that acoustics degree was actually very little to do with music, it was actually to do about waves, and waves are not just sound waves. There's electromagnetic waves, there's radars, there's transformers, there's electricity, there's microwaves. So I came out of university being offered all sorts of bizarre jobs, GEC telecommunications engineer to go and work on telephones and sound waves in that respect. Marconi Space and Defence offered me a job doing radar. And I thought, I don't want to do any of this. I was still playing saxophone all my way through university, still out every weekend, still. Well, the youth band I started with, I ended up being their conductor. So I was doing things like the school's proms, conducting youth bands in the school's proms at the Albert Hall while I was still at university doing
Oh, wow, crikey.
So I thought, well, I actually still don't want to go and have a boring job, telecommunication engineer, or I don't want to design radars and work for a defence company. That sounded ever so boring. So I thought I'll have another crack at the BBC. And this time I passed the audition, but I was 3 years later than everybody else. So I was taken on at the absolute lowest rung of the BBC as a trainee sound assistant. So I moved to London at the age of 21, 22, and started working at Shepherd's Bush when BBC still owned Television Centre there. And really, that started my whole career as a sound engineer in television. So not in music, in television. And you think, well, it was a sideways way of getting into acoustics and engineering, but very, very interesting. And actually, due to these quirks of fate, I ended up working on the tail end of what you might call the golden age of classic television, when there were only 4 channels available and everybody watched it. So, I mean, the first thing I ever did was Blue Peter. Within a week, I was working on the Kenny Everett television show.
Oh, wow.
A month after that, I was working on the 2 Ronnies. Oh. And then I ended up with Vanessa Redgrave doing plays where I was a boom operator sitting there with a microphone on the boom. And then I ended up doing Grandstand with David Coleman in that era. And, I mean, anything from Play School and Jackanory to high-end drama. I worked on as initially a sound assistant. And I worked my way up to be, in the end, a deputy sound supervisor. That's as far as I got with the BBC. Now, throughout all of this, I was working in the background as a saxophone player. And I was notorious throughout the BBC for being wanting to swap shifts. oh, they've given me a match of the day, which is late Saturday night, but I've got a gig. If I did your Jackanory on Tuesday, could you do my match on the day on Saturday night? And I spent time rushing from gig to the BBC and BBC to the gig. But it gave me an incredible grounding from sound. So when I'm on stage as a saxophone player, I understand about microphones, I understand about PA systems, I understand about feedback, I understand about mixing desks, I understand about columns. When I'm a sound engineer, I know what it's like to be a musician on stage and what you actually need to hear. So it's a really useful mix of abilities. Then I started my own recording studio at home because I thought this would be fun. And that started out with and again, the advent of technology. I was on tape, 16-track Tascam tape recorders. And that's all the stuff I used at the BBC. These great lost arts. I was a really good quarter-inch tape editor because when I joined the BBC, quarter-inch tape was the only way to edit sound. It was the only way. That's all gone, doesn't exist. That whole career doesn't exist anymore. So that's all gone. I had to learn how to edit on hard disks, but I got into hard disks very early because the BBC could afford to have hard disks. First hard disk I edit on. This will scare people who've got Logic on their computer at home or whatever they use. I used what was called an AMS audiophile. It was £35,000 and it could record up to 40 minutes continuous sound in one go on a Winchester hard disk. That was it, 40 minutes at £35,000. And the screen looked like the screen that was... do you remember when bank screens, when the first ATM machines, they had bright green phosphorant screens, your Barclays machine, that was it, bright green phosphorus screen, black screen, green lighting, and 40 minutes of recording. And I remember doing dramas and music and recording voiceovers and doing it on an AMS audiophile all those years ago. But I got into hard disk editing very early. So by working for a television industry, it got me into understanding about that. So I suppose I was on the cusp of learning about hard disks, and then MIDI came in. So I was at the front end of learning about that as well. So again, incredibly useful. So I got to this point in my career where I was approaching that kind of midlife crisis that we all go through. And I always wanted to be a professional musician. And I quit. I quit the BBC. Now, what was actually happening, I got myself into a really nice position where I'd already gone part-time. I had a recording studio at home. I was recording mainly jazz stuff at home, which was fantastic. I loved it, quartets and things. I worked with some great people. I mean, I did one of Jamie Cullum's albums, Pointless Nostalgic. I'm co-producer on that. I recorded George Melly. I recorded Georgie Fame. Did albums with Stan Tracy. Really amazing music I was privileged to record in my little home studio. But because I was a BBC trained sound engineer, I knew what gear to get hold of. I understood about acoustics. I understood about, see, there's a funny thing with recording studios. A lot of people say you waste so much time in a recording studio. I'm a television sound engineer. It's called television. It's not called telesound. The vision is the most important thing. Producers and directors want their television, their visuals. The sound is something that we take care of in the background. So what you learn as a television sound engineer is to get a really good sound as fast as possible. Not perfection, not I'm Pink Floyd and I've spent a year in the studio perfecting the sound of this one track, but something which is really good to go out on television in 30 minutes. So I got really good at creating a pretty damn good sound very quickly. Not perfect, not everything, not absolutely gorgeous, shimmering. And bizarrely, I've sort of carried this through. I actually get bored if I spend more than about 4 hours on one piece of music. I can't cope with it anymore, the way that maybe some tracks have been constructed in the past. So I got a reputation as a recording studio that I could get a band in and I could record a whole album in a day.
Great.
And I got them a good sound that they could cope with, and they were happy, and they suddenly stopped listening to the sound and worrying about it. I captured a good enough sound that they could get involved with making music. In all my career, everything I've always wanted, I wanted it to be invisible. This is a really funny thing. I talk about it as a saxophone player. I talk about the invisible saxophone and the invisible mouthpiece. So basically, that's the gear you want to own and play, so that you have an idea in your head, and then sound appears that people listen to. And the piece of machinery in the middle should become invisible.
That's a really good point.
And, and it's the same about driving a car. When you're really comfortable in a car, you get in a car, you have an idea, you know where you want to go, you look at the road ahead, you navigate the road ahead without even thinking about it.
Exactly.
You just use this machine, and the less stress that this machine gives you, it just reacts to the way you're thinking. That's it. Now you get in a recording studio, people worry about, oh, my double bass doesn't sound like right, oh, my saxophone doesn't sound very good, oh, that piano's too tinny, I can't hear myself properly. Get a good headphone mix. That's the most important. The musicians then start to relax. They trust you that you can record something good for them, and suddenly they get all creative, and that's when you're capturing what they want.
This is really interesting because there was a member of my wife's family who had a home studio back in the day, and he had a lot of old BBC equipment, and he had a friend who was a BBC engineer. It's a similar story, and he started recording a lot of jazz players. So he recorded people like Niels Pedersen, who used to work with Oscar Peterson.
Yeah.
Just in his front room of his house, and it was an interesting thing because what you're saying there is about getting the sound as if that's the sound that you're hearing. It's that what he's playing is what's on the tape.
Yeah.
Whereas of course there's a lot of other stuff going on in the concept of sound engineering nowadays with the studios.
Oh yeah.
Because once a musician can hear that their sound is being captured, and they relax, as you say, as they relax, particularly when it's playing something like jazz, then you've got something to start.
Absolutely.
But I think a lot of experiences of people in studios is so alien, especially if you've never been in one before and you struck up with your band and you've used to playing these numbers at gigs, and then suddenly you're confronted with a completely different set of ideas and somebody taking over your sound.
Yeah.
And I've just been listening to like a masterclass thing with Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah.
The guitarist. And he's telling this sort of story about what happened to him in a band before Rage Against the Machine, which was just a punk band.
Yeah.
This expensive studio. And they literally were messing around with it because they were saying, oh, you play ahead of the beat. So they tried to quantize all of his stuff so he wasn't ahead of the beat. And he was sort of listening to this stuff and thinking, that sounds terrible. What have they done? And you think, so what you're saying, that sort of thing of allowing a musician to be who they are, is so important. And again, that sort of intellectual thing where, oh no, we can do this. So suddenly the technology starts to take control of what's happening. Instead of you using the technology, it's taking control of the people.
I think there's a very interesting thing. With the advent of separate recording, with the advent of hard disk editing, the engineer is now so much more flexible. I mean, why do we love these classic jazz albums? Because basically the band played in a room together, just like it's a gig. I mean, Love Supreme, I've read the book. Coltrane set up like it was a gig. He didn't even face the band.
No.
He set up like it was a gig, and they played. Yeah. And they had no headphones, and everything worked. And then, so there's the three things that happened. The band felt totally comfortable, like it was just another gig. Why is the sound so special? Because actually it's the sound of everybody performing in the same room. I mean, what we do is we put people in separate compartments and then spend all that time getting them back to make it sound like they're standing together. And that's only to give people the chance to repair all their mistakes. Well, all the old jazz albums, they're full of mistakes.
Yeah. Of course they are.
There's stuff going on all over the place if you listen to it, but actually it's got the vibe that we love.
Yeah.
Maybe we've gone way too far the other way, and that's why punk was so amazing, because kids got in a room together and just played, and it sounded dreadful.
Well,
because everything was spilling on everything else, and a take was a take. But God, the energy was amazing.
Exactly. Well, look, think about the Elvis recordings.
Yeah.
They're just like dynamite. I mean. Okay, I don't, however many takes it took them to get the one that they were going to do. It didn't really matter. But you listen to the stuff and it comes out and grabs you. I interviewed Billy Childish, who's a sort of an artist and punk musician, right? And Bill's got about 150 albums, he thinks. He's not sure. And they are all recorded live, and they're just overdub vocals. That's it. Band in the studio, playing the tracks. and then I'll stick the vocals on, just to get some sort of separation. But apart from that, that's it.
Yeah.
And you sort of think, well, you know, that's what you want. You want the energy of coming out off the music, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So what's the next twist in this thing?
Well, the next twist in this was that, okay, I was being slightly no, I wasn't being slightly. I engineered. I went part-time at the BBC because I just thought, well, my studio's running 2 or 3 days a week now, but the BBC is really useful and I like it and it's fun. So I went part-time, and then I got myself in a lovely cushy situation where I was working on kids' early morning TV. You remember Philip Schofield, Gordon the Gopher? I was doing all of that. Great fun. And it was live television. So any sound effect, any noise you made, anything I played in, or any music I played, that's it. It's live on television. So that had the thrill of being being a live musician. And it guaranteed I worked Thursday, Friday, and Saturday morning. And then that was my week taken care of. And I was doing this for months on end. Perfect. You can plot gigs 7 nights a week. Yeah. You can plot when your studio is going to run. And it was a really nice situation. I got guaranteed money from the BBC, enough to just cover the basics. I was working money as a musician. I was earning and running my recording studio. I was working hard, but I was having a lot of fun. And then the BBC decided to hive off all children's TV to independents. It went freelance, and suddenly I was told I was back on what was called the sound pool, which means somebody in an office had the ability to schedule me to any television program at any time of the day, 7 days a week, without my knowledge. Now, I can't cope with that and work a routine as being a musician as well. That's impossible. The two don't work together. Yeah. So in the end, I said, I'll have to quit. I've got the studio running now. I've got enough music, I think, to keep everything happening together, because I don't want to retire from the BBC at 60 odd saying, I wonder if I could have been a real proper full-time pro musician.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I'll give it a few years. And bizarrely, I made the right decision. Apart from the fact that I didn't get a redundancy payment, they were making people redundant. That would have been nice. That would have been a nice cushion for a year or so to get me going. I walked out of the BBC. Within a year, I was offered the gig with the Jools Holland Rhythm and Blues Orchestra. Yeah. Again, and this is, you know, you talk about how people be in the right place at the right time. That was an interesting story. I will come back to that in a second. My studio took off.
Yeah.
And I've been a freelance musician right through, and running the studio right through till the pandemic hit. Now, bizarrely, 18 months without any gigs and without any work, what happened was I spoke to a couple of my old BBC friends, and they said, well, you know, there aren't any audiences at football matches at the moment. And there are people with a huge bank of sound effects, and you have to recreate the sound, but it's a live thing. So you have to read the match and decide what kind of sound effect goes in on something live. I said, what, like Live and Kicking, when I used to play music and sound effects? And he said, yeah, just like that.
Wow.
So, do you fancy having a go? So about August, September last year, I walked into BT Sport, luckily working with a sound supervisor who I was at the BBC with 20 years earlier, who's now a freelance. And I've been doing that on and off ever since as a deputy sound supervisor, playing sound effects for football matches and boxing and things like this.
Oh, wow.
And back work. But the thing is, once you've worked for television, the nomenclature of television, the wordage of television, run VT, it's not videotape anymore, but they still call it run TC, telecine. You see, that's how far I go back. Run TC, run VT. They're still running something which plays a clip in, and then there's breaks for this, and then bubble under music for this, and scores for this. Everything that production assistants say and producers and directors say is still familiar with me from having spent 20 years at the BBC. So again, I fell in a barrel of, you know, whatever, and came out. Somehow I got away with it. Yeah. So that's why I say this interesting career. So I've been sound engineer for music. I've been a television sound engineer. I've been a sports supervisor. I've been a saxophone player. I've been a band leader. And all of this is just sort of, you tumble from one thing to the next. But it just means it's been really interesting and really fun. Now, I sometimes wonder whether I should have gone to music college, age 18, and done 3 years there. I don't know if I would be a better musician. I'd be a different musician.
Yeah.
My whole career would have been different, but I'd probably just be a musician. Whereas this way, I've got the whole sound engineering
Right.
thing.
Well, this is a theme that comes up over and over again, right? And it doesn't matter if, I've interviewed John Etheridge, or I've spoken to Gordon Giltrap, or Steve White. It literally comes the same way. It would have been really nice if I'd gone to college, type of thing. And I wondered, blah, blah, blah. But the caveat comes in, I probably would have been doing things in a different way, and not so flexible, not so interesting. And because I think one of the problems with college, because there's always this is why I was saying that when we were having a chat beforehand, that sort of feeling of slightly the imposter syndrome, that perhaps you should know more than you do, and all the rest of it, and everybody does it.
Yeah.
Everybody does it, particularly when they start teaching it.
Oh, well, I'm doing a 4-day course next week, and I've been spending half a lockdown looking at exactly what Mixolydian and Lydian.
Exactly, and that's another thing that comes up over and over again. This is exactly, John Etheridge was saying the same thing. It was like, well, somebody came up, I'd have people come up to him and say, when you're playing over such and such, do you play an altered dominant scale over such? And he'd go, I'll get back to you on that one. It's like, they're doing that stuff anyway, but it's not what's in your head. You know what I mean? It's not the dynamic that a great musician uses. It's the way of explaining what they do. But it's not in the moment,
No, not at all. And I've been actually watching. People who I consider to be outrageously amazing musicians, people like Dave O'Higgins. I watched the Dave O'Higgins thing, and he said, right, well, of course, when you're playing a half diminished scale, if you think of the note a third below and then play a Mixolydian on that scale, it actually incorporates the same notes of this, because the third, the fifth, the seventh, and 9 of that is actually a sharp 5 raised chords from this. So whenever I see this chord, I actually think the scale of this chord. And I just think G7 sharp 5 or D7 half diminished. All right, that's what it sounds like. Right, what notes are going to work with that sound? Now, that's where I come from. That's where he comes from.
Exactly.
I actually find it really hard to even go back to thinking about that.
Yes.
It's really tough.
I mean, I think really it's, because obviously I do a lot of teaching work. I think a lot of it is just a map. So if your map is, you can hear that, that's your map, and we don't think of sounds as maps. But I mean, if you go to like the Aboriginal cultures with the idea of song lines, it's a map.
Yeah.
It's a song and it's a map.
Yeah.
And I think probably we do a lot of that with the way that we navigate musically. You can have a map. You can just go, like, obviously guitarists can see patterns on the guitar, which obviously, saxophone players can't do that, because you can't, it's all in your head, isn't it?
But you do get to feel a pattern on your hand.
Yes, you do. Yes.
It's a muscle memory thing.
Yes, it's a muscle memory thing. So some guitarists do work from a muscle memory thing, scalically, but you can see it. And you can transpose it that way, and it's quite easy. But then it has a drawback, that as soon as you get something that makes, there's a multiple set of maps, that's really difficult for a guitarist suddenly, because what they're used to, they have to sort of, it becomes a little bit cumbersome, But what I think is the important thing is that, with this idea of maps, whatever map that you feel comfortable with, whether that's, I can hear that scale with a raised fifth or whatever, or a flat 7, and you don't have to sort of see it another way, if you see what I mean. But it's whatever you do, isn't it?
But I don't think it's doing me any harm.
No.
But I've actually discovered that during this time down of watching YouTube videos and learning this, actually, what I've been teaching on the jazz courses is basically my way of saying the same stuff. So actually, thank whoever, I've been getting it pretty well right. I now know some of the official terms for what I've been doing, getting it right.
Yes.
But it was a bit frightening And this, you know, I've already forgotten what I think I'd learned about Mixolydians and Lydians, but I know these things work now, and I can go and look them up again. And again, it's like being a teacher. As long as you're one step
Yes.
ahead of the pupil, you're ahead.
I've spent all my life doing this.
Yeah. And the whole thing is, I can do things which, thanks to my dad and thanks to my ears, I have hundreds of tunes in my head, and I can just remember them. Now, this is a skill you can't really teach someone.
Yeah.
I'm just privileged and honoured that I have absolutely no qualms about jumping on a stage with virtually anybody, and just I'll join in, and I'll be able to join in with anybody doing anything just by using my ears. And that's wow, you know, I'm not up there with Chet Baker and Parker because they were supposedly ears merchants and just ran it that way. But I'm most people that you speak to people on workshops, I say, okay, now take that piece of paper away. Yeah. No, I can't do that. Take the piece of paper away. What does it sound? What's it going to sound like?
Yeah.
And that's what you can't do.
Yeah.
That's just experience. That's just experiencing every kind of music and listening to it and doing a bit of analysis on it. Apologies. But yeah, no, the ears thing, I'm just joyously lucky to have a good set of ears.
Yeah. Well, I think this is something which fascinates me, particularly coming from the point of view of the guitar, because obviously, you know, putting classical guitar to one side for the moment, but just mostly contemporary guitar in whatever form, it's like, well, most of it is ear driven, you know, at some point in time. You know, it doesn't matter which route you go down.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you look at jazz, you know, you got Django. I mean, Django couldn't even read and write, so let alone read music. I mean, so you got and then you've got all of those other people, from the flamenco players to, you know, whatever, R&B players, whatever, all playing by ear basically, with maybe some sort of chart that might just give them the chord, you know, shape, and that's it, you know, or whatever. But what I see, and there might be something in this with regard to you talking about people like, you know, the people that are really ear driven, you know, you mentioned Chet Baker and whatever, that with guitar, we've got a lot of people learning now from some form of written stuff, whether it's tablature or whatever, musicians who were ear driven.
Yeah.
And that seems like there's something not quite right about that. You know, how do you really understand what's going on with a solo by somebody where it's all literally coming in this way?
Yeah.
When you're just looking at a transcription, there's something there's a little bit of a mismatch here.
Yeah.
And I think that's, as you say, an important thing. Once you take that piece of music away, what happens?
Yeah.
What happens to that person's playing? What happens to the way that they communicate with the instrument? Because you're talking about the instrument disappearing. And I think that's a really good point, because, you know, again, when you look at great players, it's like that instrument's almost incidental. There's something going on, but it looks like they're not really playing it somehow, whether that's a great piano player like Oscar Peterson or something like that. It just, there's a piano in front of him, but all this stuff's coming out of it.
Yeah.
You know?
And I mean, there's great jokes and all this kind of thing about someone. There's a famous story about someone going to a jazz club, and there's an alto player playing there, and some puncher in the audience said to him, "Oh, you just sound like Charlie Parker." So he takes the alto and pushes it towards him and says, "Well, go on, you sound just like Charlie Parker then."
Yeah. That's right.
And I mean, it's that kind of thing. I remember being told off. One of my earliest poppy sort of gigs, I worked with the Bootleg Beatles.
Yeah.
Which was very interesting. And that's actually one of my roots into the Jools Holland band, because I swapped gigs with Lisa Graham and the Bootleg Beatles.
Right.
And then she took over in the Bootleg Beatles, and years later she returned the compliment by inviting me to audition for Jools. Right. So it's about who you meet, and the most bizarre gigs you meet people.
Yes.
If you get on empathetically, it can help your whole future career.
Yes.
So, you know, I said I'd come back to it. The way you get into the Jools Holland band is not by being in the right place at the right time, is always by being in the right place, and eventually one of those will be the right time. And by being in the right place, I don't mean playing in stadiums and massive gigs. I mean, sort of, as I say, doing the bootleg Beatles, playing "All You Need Is Love," and that's kind of, there's no challenge to it musically, but that led me to meet some really unusual people. And then I was doing pub gigs in a basement for a little rock and roll comedy band, but the band were great, and I loved it. And it was bugger all money. I don't know what it was. It was, I don't care what the money was.
No.
For me, I've always felt if the music's good, I'm up for it. And I met Jason McDermott, who is one of the trumpet players with the Jools Holland band. And I thought, well, you know, do any gig, take the musician, just say, do any gig, you'll learn. You might even learn never to work with that musician again.
Yeah.
You may meet, so you think, well, if I'm prepared to do this gig, then who else is prepared to do this gig? You can meet someone on a gig on one day, and that can change the whole course of your musical future.
Yes.
And that happened to me by meeting Lisa Graham and by meeting Jason McDermott in the most bizarre situations. And they both put me up for the audition for the Jools gig at some later stage, because they'd done tiny little gigs with me elsewhere and thought, yeah, he's got the right attitude. He's got the right vibe. Let's give him a try. So it's not, you know, you don't be pushy, but never pass up on an opportunity to play some kind of music somewhere. And, you know, by playing in punk bands, by playing in fusion bands, by playing in almost progressive rock bands when I was young, it gave me a chance that when I ended up with Jools working with, you know, I did something with Rick Wakeman recently. I've done something with Ian Hunter from Mott the Hoople. I've played with Mavis Staples. I've played with Bobby Womack. All these different diverse musical styles, and you've got to be able to cope with them. So by putting yourself in a situation, you know, when you work with some sort of great country people, you know, you actually realize, I didn't discover soul music until I was living in London. I was just jazz. And I thought, oh, this soul stuff, it's just all those simple simple lines. And then I played with a real soul band, and I thought, my, this is amazing. The feel, the vibe, the way the bass is, the way the drums lock in, the way the guitar plays with that. It's this amazing jigsaw, and I didn't understand. It was a simple jigsaw, but it just fitted so perfectly. And then I learned about soul music, so that when you end up playing with, you know, well, as I say, Mavis Staples, Martha Reeves, I've done all these, you know, performed with these people now, I understand where they're coming from. And that's only by spreading yourself and trying any form of musical. Just go out there and try it. That's the biggest recommendation.
That's a really good point. I mean, talking about the sort of jigsaw, you know, the sort of groove that a type of music has. This is another one of those sort of things that's difficult to get across to people until they experience it themselves. You know, if you're getting somebody playing, you know, because obviously guitar players tend to be rather conceited about what they like and what they don't like. You know, you get and over a period of time that broadens out. You know, a young kid who's just into just heavy metal or whatever will eventually start thinking, oh, okay, I get this. And it's those sort of moments when, for me, it happened with reggae. I used to play a lot of reggae. Yeah. But I didn't come into reggae wanting to play reggae. I just happened to end up in a band that became a reggae band. But what was sort of weird about it was that I just had an ability to play that sort of groove. And I didn't realise until I started doing it.
No.
And then you get to that thing, as you say, about the interaction between the drummers and the bass players and stuff. And then once you can do that, then the drummers like you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the drummers look at you thinking, well, it's, you know, there's a guitarist.
Again, bass players. The best bass player is the invisible, inaudible bass player. You don't hear a damn note they play. I was on stage with Winston Blissett last night. Now, I love Winston Blissett. He's the guy that does Massive Attack. He's done, oh God, all sorts of people over the years. Jimmy Ruffin, also. Who did The Harder They Come, The Harder They Fall? Well,
Jimmy Cliff.
Jimmy Cliff, yeah, he was on later with Jimmy Cliff. He's done all, so Lisa Stansfield. He's done so much great work. Amazing bass player. So we're back with our fusion band, Protect the Beat. First gig out, 14 months, last night, on stage. And Darby, the drummer, saying, oh, come on, we can all do this. We don't need to. And I'm practicing the heads, quickly saying, are we okay on this one? We haven't done it for this long. Are we going to be all right? So we just got into the gig. And actually, it was great. We all remembered. And then there was just Winston missed one bass note, and it's kind of like this one bass note was like a klaxon horn going off, because for the rest of it, it had just felt like the Juggernaut was steaming along the motorway at 70, and we were having such a great time. And it just shows you that you only hear it when it's not right.
Exactly.
Again, the invisibility. The perfect rhythm section is an invisible rhythm section that allows you to be creative and picks you up and says, yeah, I've got you. My one thing with jazz students on jazz workshops is that when they get to play, we end up, as it's going to happen next week, we'll end up putting them in bands. So the saxophone player has got a piano player who's learning, who's got a bass player who's learning, who's got a drummer who's learning. So they're not actually getting the experience. What I want to say is, right, now you go and do the same number with the tutor's rhythm section.
Yeah.
And suddenly they've got you. These big hands, these great big cupped hands will have got you. They'll go wherever you want to go. And and it's this fantastic experience. And when I do that, I often try and say, right, even if you only do a minute with the real rhythm section, so realize that actually you're struggling a little bit you're learning, but you're struggling because you're with a piano player who's struggling as much as you are, with a bass player who's struggling as much as you are, and a drummer who's struggling as much as you are. So you've got 4 levels of struggling going on. So you're never going to be able to create something as good as this yet. But believe me, when it happens, it's amazing. So have a quick go in this warm bath over here and realize it's not you. It's not you messing up as much as you think you are.
No, that's right.
Because you haven't got this. This is what it's really like. Have a go in my Rolls Royce.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of thing. Yes, that's great. I mean, there's an experience that I had when I first got the experience of what you've just said there. I'd worked with a load of people that were I've always had friends who were good drummers. So I was a bit spoilt, really. And then I got involved in a little project where they took part of my band. It was something with EMI. And it was almost like there was part of my band and then part of somebody else's band sort of put together. But it wasn't the drummer that I was used to working with, but it was the bass player I was used to working with. And we did this first rehearsal and we sort of recorded it and stuff. And we walked out and I said to Andy, the bass player, I said, I don't know about you. I said, but I was absolute shit tonight. I don't know what was going on. And he went, same as me. He said, I don't know. I just said, that place is just rubbish. Anyway, we sat and listened to the recording. And he went, the drummer's out at the time. And it was like, oh my God. But it was so subtle.
Yeah.
That you didn't hear it was wrong, but you just felt it was wrong.
Yeah.
And it made your own playing, it wasn't sitting in the pocket, and it was like, oh my God. So I've often sort of, and you saying that is really good, that is something that people need to experience.
Yeah, they need
how much, a rhythm section, because really, if you're playing an instrument like, the guitar that's not necessarily playing rhythm, but playing melody or lead or whatever, and the saxophone playing melodies, the rhythm section's doing all the work, basically. Right. And you're just putting the stuff on the top. I think, again, talking from the point of view of guitarists, a lot of them just don't realise that, You sort of say to them, who's the most important person in the band? It's him over there, the drummer. He's the guy, he's the one you've got to be really listening to or feeling,
Yeah, yeah.
But, it's an interesting perspective for people because I think a lot of, this must be true for saxophones as well as guitars. It becomes very, very focused on what you're doing.
Yeah.
And not the context, which I think, what you're doing with that, putting them into, as you say, letting them sit in your Rolls Royce for a while.
Yeah.
Really gives them the sort of feel of like, God, yeah, I really get that, what that feels like.
Yeah. And then it gives them something to aim at.
Yeah.
And then it also gives them a confidence that they realise that they're not as crazy as they thought by thinking, oh, this isn't comfortable. Well, there's a reason why it's not comfortable. And you know, there's all these people that try and run before they can walk. They've learned all these complicated scales, and they look at all the chords, and they say, right, it's G7 flat 9, so I can play this scale as fast as I can. I said, no. What do you want to play? What do you think? Think of the music. Serve the music. What would work well? What would sound good? What do you want to do? So start by playing nothing, and have a listen first. It's like you don't go chucking the herbs in when you're cooking something because you think, oh, that'd be great. Let's throw all these. No, taste it first and see what it tastes like. Does it need any more? How much more? Only a tiny bit of something. If you think it needs a bit more spice, then off you go. But consider the meal, not just your own personal ingredient.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's very good. Very good point.
And that's come from me sitting in a studio listening to hundreds of different rhythm sections, all trying to get it together. Some work and some really don't work. You know, and it's being a studio engineer is like being a psychiatrist. Let me assure you. And you've got 4 people on the couch at the same time. And you've got to talk to each of them in turn, and you've got to be really careful because they're all so paranoid about their own individual comment. And if you dare to criticize it or possibly suggest that something gets changed, which you feel will be for the improvement of the collective, but if they don't feel it, you know, you've got to be really careful. You've got to be. There's big jokes about it. It's about, you know, what the engineer said and what the engineer meant. And there's all that. Well, the classic gag is the girl singer and says, how do you know when you've just made love to the studio engineer? He says, darling, that was absolutely fantastic. Now, can we just do it one more time?
Yeah. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I switched the red light on. No, that's another gag.
That's a different gag. As
cool.
Well. Don't start us on drummer jokes.
No, we won't go there. Well, maybe we could do, but anyway. So what have you got lined up then?
Well, the good things, I hope, the really good things, is Jools Holland Rhythm and Blues Orchestra will return. We do seem to have 3 gigs in August, which is the last vestige of this summer left over. They're all outdoors. One's in Sandringham. Never been to Sandringham. That'd be quite nice. Yeah. Try not to run over the corgis on the way in.
Absolutely.
I think that's 28th of August. And then the tour for real kicks off in October, end of October, start in Ireland, UK tour. All those gigs appear to be going ahead at the moment. I was looking at some of the sales, things like Bournemouth and Brighton are 2/3, 3/4 sold out now already, which is good. There will be something interesting because we were supposed to be having Leo Sayer as our special guest.
Oh, right.
And he's not allowed to fly over.
Oh.
Australia has said no. So I don't know who our special guest will be. We have got Lulu for some of the dates. Maybe she'll be doing more. I adore working with Lulu. I've done one tour with her before. She's such a pro. She's really, you know, one of the band. She doesn't sit in a dressing room. She's out there. She's having a drink and a laugh with all of you. And she's a total pro, delivers 1000% on stage every night. So I'm looking forward to that. So that's that. The month or 2 before that, we have, I've got a wonderful project called Some Kind of Wonderful, which is the band I run with Noel McCallagh, the singer I met years ago when he was in Morrissey Mullen and then Manfred Mann's Earth Band. And we decided to put together a Stevie Wonder project. Now, it's not a tribute. We don't dress up. He doesn't pretend he's blind. He doesn't mime behind a piano. No. We just celebrate the music of. And there's sort of 2 layers of what you call tribute bands. There's the ones that go out and emulate exactly, note for note. We don't do that, but we do celebrate the music of. We do our own arrangements, and you can be really creative with it. You can start Don't You Worry About a Thing the way it was done in 1974 on the original album and end up with a live version from the Nice Jazz Festival in the 90s. You know, so you can take way Stevie changed it because he had a brass section there and it all changed up and it turned into a big salsa roar-up. So that gives us excuse. It's an incredible band. We had a tour in 2020, our first big theatre tour with that. That all got cancelled. So that is on the cards for September and October. It's all there. The problem we have is that normally by now, June, shall we say, we're almost in June, theatres would have had a brochure printed up with all that info, which would have been out. So they would have had 6 months lead up on the brochures. None of those brochures are there. Posters haven't been printed. No flyers have been printed yet because everyone's too scared to commit.
Yeah.
Theatres would have had a footfall
Yeah.
of 500 people a night looking and saying, oh, well, what should we come and see next? Yeah. Firstly, theatres don't even know how scared people are to go out. No. So we're trying to promote our first proper theatre tour on the back of social media. And it's a real struggle. You know, and I'm scared stiff that some gigs will fall by the wayside, but we've just trying to gauge public opinion, and we haven't got that engine of just a normal theatre concert going society behind us, which normally we've presumed to generate loads of work. Yeah,
that's right. I mean, that is a problem, that sort of natural flow of stuff that are stopped, you know. So I run a summer school, and again, it's a similar thing. You know that because for a year you've been talking about it, and you know, and all the rest of it, you might get a bunch of people turning up right at the last minute, but they know it's on.
Yeah.
Now you haven't had that run-in, so in a small scale way, it's similar to what you're saying about the theatres. You know, you haven't got as you say, you haven't got the footfall.
Yeah.
You haven't got
well, even last night, I fell found to it. I spoke to someone in the audience at Tunbridge Wells where I was playing last night, and he said, "Oh, well, when is that gig at the Stag Theatre in Sevenoaks?" I said, "Oh, well, we've pulled it now." He said, "Oh, well, good job I hadn't got my tickets." I said, "No, that's the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Haven't got your tickets." Now the problem with the gig was it was the 1st of July, and the restrictions may or may not get lifted on the 21st of July. Yeah. So we had a deal with the theatre promoter which said, well, we're going to have to work on a 50-50, so obviously we can't pay the full fee for the theatre. And he said, well, no, officially, I'm probably going to be able to sell every ticket. He said, well, we won't know that till 9 days before the gig. He said, well, no, you're going to have to pay the full fee for the full theatre, but with no lead up. Yeah. And we'd sold 50-odd tickets. Now, when the capacity was 150, 50-odd tickets 3 months before was doing okay. When we'd suddenly been told it's now 300 capacity and you've got to fill it and pay the full fee and and we don't even know till the 21st of June whether that gig's allowed to happen or not. You know, we're looking at losing money. Yeah. Or taking massive risks, and it's, you know, the promoters are scared enough as it is at the moment. And musicians haven't got any money to throw around because we've not been earning for 18 months. So we can't, you know, normally I'd say, I'll take a punt on the gig if I don't earn very much. What the hell, let's do it. But I can't do that. Not now. And every musician I know, the guitar player I'm playing with tonight says, oh, it's okay. I've got 2 of my guitars back out of the pawn shop. And that is a real problem. And this guitarist is a serious guitar player, but he's having to be doing deliveries, you know, food collection. He's been doing freelance Uber Eats to try and earn money for the last 18 months, and had to pawn his guitars. A guitar player pawning his guitars when they're that's horrific situation. So these people need to work, desperate to earn. So I can't take them to a gig and say, oh, sorry, it's only half the fee tonight because none of the punters didn't come out. So it's a real, you know, it's chicken and egg at the moment. It will obviously get better, but it's difficult. So those are my 2 main things. I've got Some Kind of Wonderful tour, and I've got the Jools. I think the Jools is more guaranteed than some kind of wonderful will happen. And during lockdown, we finished off a whole album of it. So that's great. I'll have a new album of that. I've shot a new video for it. So been editing bits of that together. So I've been working hard for that. I've mixed another whole album, which totally opposite thing, a jazz thing, which I hope to bring out in January and February, which is the music of Jerry Mulligan and Chet Baker. Totally opposite. That's the recreating the 1940s pianoless, 1950s pianoless quartet. So I'm really proud of that, and I had a chance to learn that, and I've learned lots of new software on my computer.
Yeah, well, as you said before we started off about how creative people have been in this period of time, because obviously lots of people have learned how to use Zoom.
Yes. I used the hard disk system. That was different to Logic before. So I started Logic from scratch in whatever it was, April last year. I'm now doing all my projects on Logic. because my old studio had a thing called Soundscape in it, even just using OBS to learn how to do live stream things and concerts like this. All of that stuff you have to learn. How to suddenly make your little box in the corner work so that you can do lessons online. Trying to get over the sync problems of Zoom, trying to get it not dropping out. All of this, we've all had to learn. It's been amazing, but we'll be the better for it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting, because I think actually what it'll do is it'll give us a lot more possibilities of things. Because like, even now, I'm teaching some people face to face again, but I still quite like the idea of having some of it online. I don't want it all online, but it's just a little bit more flexibility. And the same thing, I'm just about to start recording an album which will be purely online. Do your stuff and send your file off to somebody else, because the band that's doing this now, we've got somebody in California, somebody in Melbourne, so that there is no way of us doing it in the studio like we would have done it in the past.
No, of course not. Of course not. Of course not. I suppose if it is, I've been doing a lot of this myself. I suppose the what I would say to anybody who's doing this, and I'm having a chat with you, but I'm having it, we talked about musicians passing on tips to other musicians, and that's the way we learn. We talk to other musicians and say, if you're doing something for somebody online, give them a selection. And I've had this with people that say, oh, I've done a guitar part, and you just get one guitar part.
No, you want loads. Yeah.
No, you want 2 or 3, and someone, you want someone to say, well, how about I've got groove A, groove B, or groove C. There's 3 choices for you. If ever I do a solo for somebody, Bill Sharp asked me to do something for a Shack Attack album. I gave him 4 solos. I didn't give him 1, I gave him 4. Bizarrely enough, he ended up choosing the one I thought, oh, well, that's just a little throwaway one. I don't like that one as much. I really like number 1, but you give the producer choice. Yeah. You give them, and I worked with my drummer Darby Todd from Protect the Beat, and we did a session. And Darby was such a great way of doing this. He would not give me the drum stems until I was happy with the drum part. So he said, "Here's a rough mix, and all you're getting is an MP3 of the rough mix of the drums. Here's what I consider to be the first take. Let me know." And then he would not let me have it until I got. So I said, "Oh, can we just do the hits at the end of the end of the chorus there? If you can hit those 2 things for me." And I think that's too much on the ride cymbal at the end. Maybe we could just halve it, or and I changed 3 or 4 things, and then it's still another MP3, and only then. Now that was a really pro way of working down the line. And too many people working down the line just do what they want, send it, and then think that's it. One is not enough. Be open, be flexible to helping your producer. The one thing about all doing things in different homes, if we have lost the role of the producer in the studio, who sat there with everyone saying, "No, it's not working, bass, it's just too busy at that point. Can we just calm that bit?" Or, "I think it'd be really grateful. Don't hit that groove till we hit 3rd time round. It's a great groove, but save the energy for a bit later. Try this. Oh, guitar, can you maybe just try a 1-notey thing rather than the chord thing?" So all of these things, we have to learn to be producers if we're going to do this Zoom down the line, sending anything. It's amazing that we can send anything to everybody around the world now, but we then have to become producers. Or you have to set up a Zoom or a Skype call in the corner, and as you're recording it, say, "What do you think of this one? What do you think of that one?"
Yeah.
But being open to going back and changing it is the key to being a successful online musician.
Yeah. That's brilliant. Well, thanks, Derek. That was a great chat. That was so interesting.
Absolute pleasure. We talked about stuff I didn't think we were going to talk about.
That's what happens when I do these things. It always goes off into uncharted territory.
Good.
But yeah, it's good. So wish you all the best with what you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah. We'll keep an eye out for everything you do. Now, I'll put some stuff in the show notes. So if you send me some details, and that's probably the easiest way.
We're just sort of a general biography sort of thing.
Yeah. Or your websites or whatever you got.
Yeah, I can do that. Have I got your email?
I'll send it to you.
Yeah, send me as an email, because I think I've only on Messenger, and for some reason.
It's
always harder to find Messenger on a main computer than it is. It's always on your phone. I didn't want to do this on the phone. It would drive me up the wall.
No, that's cool. Right,
great,
brilliant. Thanks very much, mate. Really good.
Great pleasure. Great pleasure. Anytime. Good luck with it all, and see you soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thanks to Derek. That was an interesting story of lots of different musical projects, and it just makes you realise that sometimes you come at things from a very left field or sort of complex series of events. There's no straight line. So yeah, it was good. So details on the show notes as usual, and until next time, I'll see you then.